Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Kreutzer. I'm a senior here at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm serving as the dramaturg on Pitt Stages' production of A New Brain by William Finn. I'm here today with some wonderful experts in the field of neuroscience, as well as an actor from our production of A New Brain, to have a little bit of a discussion as to how the themes in this show intersect with their work and the broader themes that we address in the show. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our lovely leading man, Ryan Steinly.
Hello, I'm Ryan Steinly. I am a senior at Pitt. I am studying Spanish and classics, and I am portraying Gordon in the production of A New Brain. I'm a cis white man. My pronouns are he, him, and yeah, excited to have this conversation.
Okay. Hi, I am Jessica Nuwer. I'm a postdoc in Dr. Tia Jacobs' lab at the University of Pittsburgh, and I have my PhD in neuroscience. I am a white woman, and I am in my living room with a blurred background and a purple sweater, long hair.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nathan Schneider. I am a second-year PhD student at Pitt in the neuroscience program. I'm working the lab of Ross Williamson, and my research focuses on understanding how the auditory cortex works and auditory perception and how it guides our behavior. I'm a cis white man. My pronouns are he, him, and I am here in the kitchenette of my lab floor sipping my morning coffee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Yttri. I'm a neuroscientist and the Eberle Family Career Development Professor of Biological Science. I'm also the music director of the Black Rock Philharmonic, and from time to time, I play a flame-throwing tuba. I'm a cis white male with a big beard, go by he, him, and I am sitting in front of some of my sister's interesting tile art.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. For anyone who is watching today who hasn't yet gotten the experience to listen to A New Brain or to come see our own production of it, I want to give everyone a super brief synopsis. A New Brain is a show about making the most out of life in the face of tragedy. When a neurotic, frustrated composer is confronted with a terminal illness, he finds comfort in the healing power of art. The show is, in fact, William Finn's autobiographical account of his own battle for life when he was afflicted with a seemingly terminal illness. As the central character, Gordon Michael Schwinn, struggles to survive, he finds salvation in the healing power of art. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to explain a little bit about what is happening from an actor's standpoint with Gordon, and then I'll turn it over to Eric to explain from a neurological standpoint what is actually happening to Gordon.
So Gordon is truly just such a privilege to be able to portray. His story is really profound, and especially given that it's pretty much a true story entirely is something that I take. I'm really grateful to be able to share this story. He is a composer who, at the beginning of the story, struggles a lot with his artwork. He has to work on a children's TV show and doesn't get to produce the music that he would find as creatively fulfilling. And so he struggles a lot with this, and this becomes a running theme throughout the show, and the torment that he feels knowing that this may be the last work that he ever produced, that he may never have gotten the chance or had the time to produce a work of art that he feels proud of and that he's able to leave on as his legacy. So in that way, I think the show touches on a lot of really profound themes relating to your legacy, your immortality, especially as it relates to creatives and just the world of artwork. He also experiences a lot of hallucinations throughout due to the neurological condition that he is suffering with throughout the show. But it's really a beautiful way to consider his own life and his memories and his childhood and what he's looking back on the life that he's lived.
And then Eric, what is this neurological condition? Explain it to maybe some of us, like maybe Ryan and myself, who don't have all of the expertise to match everyone else in this room.
Well, there's a lot more to it, but maybe the easiest way to think of it is as something halfway between a stroke and a tumor. And as such, the most obvious treatment for it is to open up a hole in the skull and get down in there, which is something that even for someone without a medical background, not something that most people look forward to. And depending on where this is, you might have different effects and deficits. The brain is arranged into different functions, and so if it's in the visual area, you might have a hard time seeing the music. If it's in a motor or cognitive area, you might have a difficult time producing it, or even thinking about the musical concepts.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I want to kind of follow this thread a little bit. Obviously, there is different levels of background and experience, both in this room and also in our audience and in our cast. Doing a production with this content matter at the University of Pittsburgh obviously appeals to the fact that we are a school with a student population predominantly in the natural sciences. And so, Jessica, because your work kind of centers around maybe intersecting a lot of these topics, even within this show, we think of the social sciences, we think of the humanities, and of course the natural sciences. I'm curious, what are some of the benefits of taking a really interdisciplinary approach like this? And maybe how does this fit into some of the work that you've been doing?
So I know that not everybody has a strength in science and understanding the complex words sometimes. And so I know that a lot of people get very overwhelmed at even just trying to begin understanding these things. And so that's why I like to really try to break things down and make it accessible and understandable and use metaphors and things that help other people understand and find a strand or something that they can grasp onto to be able to understand these more complex topics and these other difficult things that people go through. And I also want to figure out what's going on. And so that's why I decided to go into neuroscience and study the brain and try and figure out what's happening when we have mental health problems and when we have psychoses and things like that.
Again, to kind of focus in on the setting in which we're performing this production, it's so interesting to me because all of our students are required to take those general education requirements. Like, I've taken one singular neuroscience class about drugs and behavior that was very interesting, but very out of my reach a little bit. And so I love that we're able to find a really fun way to kind of introduce us to these topics. I love the show, and I think it's really interesting to be able to approach all of the different fields like this.
I definitely have taken plenty of classes where I'm like, I don't know what we are talking about. I don't know how this is going to apply to my life. Why should I care?
Learning hurts sometimes for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was a few times in that drugs and behavior class where we were talking on a very basic cellular level, which is a little bit out of my theater arts background. So switching gears just a little bit, Ryan, can you briefly explain a little bit about what is going on with these hallucinations? Because they're both auditory and visual, and then what might be happening on a more neurological standpoint.
Absolutely. So throughout the show, after he's diagnosed with the condition, he starts to have these hallucinations, and they're usually dramatized versions of scenes that he would have in his own life. So for instance, one of the recurring motifs that he continually sees throughout the show is his boss, Mr. Bungie, who works on the children's TV show where he writes music for. He feels tormented by him, and he's usually being yelled at by him for not writing good enough music and for just being such a failure, for not being successful, for not having written anything profound. That's one of the recurring hallucinations. He also has hallucinations between him and his boyfriend Roger, and feeling like his boyfriend doesn't love him as much, and that he would rather just be out sailing the seas than be home with him. And he also experiences a lot of hallucinations relating to his childhood and his mostly absent father. So there's kind of a variety of hallucinations that he experiences throughout the show, and that allow him to reflect on his life. It's really interesting in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, these hallucinations are obviously very complex, involving, multiple sensory systems, past memories, emotions, things like that. Historically in neuroscience, I think scientists tried to partition the brain into specific functions, like this area, processes vision, this area studies audition. But more recently, we realize everything is very interconnected. And so something my research looks at is what is the like auditory part of the brain? What else does that connect to? And it really connects to everything. There are connections to the visual system. There are connections to areas of our brain that process rewards, that deal with emotions, and it's all really interconnected. So one localized, issue in the brain can really affect a multitude of different things. And that's, I think, where these links with both auditory and visual hallucinations come in, as well as playing on like the emotions and memories and things like that.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And then Ryan, there's a bit of the show where he is in where he's unconscious, where he's in a coma, correct? So maybe is there major differences, and this is also for my own curiosity. What are kind of the differences in that perspective? Obviously, like Gordon uses the term brain dead, correct? Which he clearly is not. He does survive, spoiler alert. But I'm curious if like how that would influence things as opposed to when someone is actively awake and like processing some of the things happening around them versus unable to do so.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know as much specifically about comas, but there's a lot of research out there comparing like awake behavior with like anesthetized brain activity. And there's vast differences in the amount of, like electrical activity in your brain. Everything is balanced. You have both excitation and inhibition happening constantly, which balances itself out and creates this homeostasis in the brain in like a normal awake brain. But when you have some kind of like incapacitation, like a coma, or if you're under anesthesia, this balance is out of whack. And you get rid of a lot of this sort of normal baseline activity.
So as Nathan mentioned, like there's this balance between excitation and inhibition. And the excitation is the green light, it's go, go, go. And the inhibition is the stop, slow down, take a break. And when you're in a coma, you have a large amount of that inhibition. You foot's slamming on the brake. And so a lot of the go functions are just shutting down and you're in this deep state of sleep, basically. And so where I study is involved in benzodiazepine tolerance, which is more out of the scope of the show, but is in the excitation inhibition coma balance. I won't go too far into that because that's getting out of the scope.
No, that's really interesting and really helpful. Kind of on a similar trajectory, I know that you talked a lot about how like you're studying mental health and emotions and different like emotional regulatory processes as it relates to the brain. And I'm curious when there's something, when there's some kind of neurological trauma to this magnitude. Obviously, we see Gordon go through so many different emotions in the show, and arguably to much more heightened level than he would on his normal baseline. So how does a major neurological episode like this affect our emotions? And also how do they affect how we're able to regulate them to our family members who sometimes bear the brunt of Gordon's illness here?
Yeah, that is a loaded question. Trauma like that, a lot of people know of PTSD, which a lot of veterans come home with and stuff, but that can be caused by more than just guns and bombs and that kind of stuff. Even smaller traumas can still change the brain because it's called plasticity. The brain is very plastic. It can morph, it can mold, it can make new connections between different neurons. And somehow these traumas cause that to happen, whether it be through too much of a given neurotransmitter or what have you. I'm not sure on the certain science of that. That's a little out of my scope, but I do know from experience and from looking into my own experience that emotional regulation is very difficult, especially when you have a lot on your plate and when things are changing. And I do know through my own therapy that the amygdala, and which is kind of like the lizard brain. It's the old brain. It's your emotion center, basically, and not only emotions, but and the prefrontal cortex in the front of your brain, which is your decision making. It's your executive brain. The connection between those is gone. Like the prefrontal cortex just stops talking to the amygdala. And so you lose that ability to make rational thought and to think before you speak or react. And so I don't know how to fix it yet, but we're working on that.
No, that definitely provides some insight into the way that Gordon interacts with some of his loved ones in the show. And Eric, I know that there is definitely a lot of evidence for kind of maybe how this plasticity in particular would influence even music and neurological trauma. So can you talk a little bit about some of these very interesting case studies that you're able to point to?
Yeah. So two case studies that hopefully we'll have links to that really show the intersection of the brain and music. First is Clive Wearing, who's one of the top classical musicians in the UK, and actually had a brain injury, much like what is in the show. And this left him without any memory of anything that's happened in the last 20 years. Which is a sort of traumatic way to go about your life. He's never seen anyone except for maybe his wife that he remembers. He's never been anywhere. His memory is 7 seconds long. If you were to walk out of the room and walk back in, he would say, "You've never been here." And that's sort of philosophically sort of a ridiculous predicament to be in. But the sort of fantastic thing is, because there are some different types of memories, he has retained all of his musical skill. And to see him in front of a piano or conducting an orchestra, it's as if he never stopped. And so it's a real, really interesting juxtaposition of the different aspects of the brain. On the other side, there is someone named Derek Amato, who could probably plink out "Mary Had a Little Lamb" on his mom's piano, and then as an adult dove into the short end of a pool, survived, had some brain injuries, but came up not just normal, but now a musical savant. He writes about 1 symphony a week, and the music just flows. He closes his eyes, and it's. I encourage you to listen to the podcast of him describing it. It's he just sees notes, and his fingers just move on the piano, and it all comes out. And we have zero idea how this has happened. And cases like this are exceedingly rare, but just sort of crazy that something sort of abstract like music hitting your head in just the right way, which I don't recommend trying, it just fundamentally changes and adds this ability to his life. Really just fascinating. And we have no idea how it happens.
That's crazy. I was able to look at some of the links, and we're definitely going to put them below in the description so everyone can check those out. But that's truly like so fascinating. And I think a very interesting way to kind of take Gordon's story and show some real life applications beyond even just William Finn's life. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I hope this was a great supplement to kind of help bridge some of the gaps between your expertise and what we might see reflected on stage at Pitt Stages. A New Brain does open in the Charity Randall Theater in the Stephen Foster Memorial on February 18th. You can get tickets at play.pitt.edu, and we certainly hope to see you there. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And if you are interested, we do have another conversation with some brilliant composers, including Eric and Ryan, also on this YouTube channel that you can totally check out. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you at A New Brain on February 18th. Thanks, everyone.